My family skipped my wedding for my golden child sister's brunch, but when they sent me an $87,000 bill for raising me, I got restraining orders against everyone and vanished forever. I'm 27 years old. I work in digital marketing, and honestly, I need to get all of this off my chest because what happened with my family basically forced me to move to a different city and start over from scratch. And to this day, I don't know if I did the right thing or if I'm the one who's crazy. The thing is, I grew up being the second daughter, the one who was always there but never really seen. And my older sister, Jessica, who's 29 now, was basically the family star for as long as I can remember. I don't know at what point my parents decided she was the favorite, but by the time I was like 8 or 9 years old, it was super obvious. Like there was no way to ignore it. Jessica was always the pretty one, the smart one, the one who did everything right according to my parents. When she got good grades, it was because she was brilliant. When I got good grades, it was because the test had been easy or because I'd gotten lucky. If Jessica wanted something, my parents moved heaven and earth to get it for her. But when I asked for something, there was always a reason why it couldn't happen. That it was too expensive, that it wasn't the right time, that I had to wait. I remember once, I must have been like 12. I wanted to take piano lessons because I really liked music, and my parents said there was no money for that. But literally 2 weeks later, they bought Jessica a used car so she could practice driving, even though she wasn't old enough for her license yet. Can you believe it? And when I complained to them, they'd tell me I was being dramatic, that I was making things up, that Jessica needed those opportunities because she had more potential, or something like that. The truth is, I grew up feeling invisible in my own house. My birthdays were simple dinners at home, Jessica's were big parties with all her friends. When Jessica graduated from high school, there was a huge celebration. When I graduated, my mom made lasagna, and that was it. It's not that I expected something super special. You know what I mean? But the difference was so noticeable that it hurt. And the worst part is, Jessica knew perfectly well the power she had over my parents, and she used it constantly. If I bothered her or we had a normal sister fight, she'd run to my parents, and I was the one who ended up getting punished. Always. No matter what had actually happened. She could do basically whatever she wanted and get away with it. But I had to walk on eggshells all the time. When I turned 18, I got out of that house as fast as I could. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop, enrolled in university with student loans and a partial scholarship, and rented a room in a shared apartment with 2 other girls. It wasn't easy, not at all. I was working like 30 hours a week and studying full-time, but it was better than continuing to live in that environment where I always felt less than my sister. My parents didn't even try to convince me to stay. I think my dad said something like, "Well, if that's what you want." And my mom was more worried because Jessica had broken up with her boyfriend that week. So anyway, I left and I thought I was finally going to be able to breathe. But Jessica couldn't just let me be, Like a year after I moved out, she started spreading horrible rumors about me. She told my parents and all the extended family that I'd become a drug addict, that I was drinking all the time, that I was destroying my life. And my parents believed her, obviously, without even asking me first or coming to see how I really was. One day, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, searched everything, looking for drugs or alcohol bottles. She didn't find anything, because I wasn't doing any of that. And when I told her Jessica was lying, she just told me to stop blaming my sister for my problems. It was so surreal. Like she was literally seeing there was nothing, and still treated me like I was a liar. My dad called me later and gave me a lecture about how I was disappointing the family, about how Jessica was worried about me, and when I tried to defend myself, he hung up on me. After that, I decided to cut contact completely. It was like, if you're going to believe everything she says without even listening to me, then I don't need this toxicity in my life. I blocked their numbers, stopped going to family gatherings, basically acted like they didn't exist. And honestly, it was liberating. I mean, it hurt because they're still my parents. But it was also a huge relief not to have to deal with all that constant drama. I focused on my studies, on my work, on building a life that was mine, without all those comparisons, and without constantly feeling inadequate. Like 2 years passed like that, without talking to them at all. And then my dad had a heart attack. My aunt, my mom's sister, called to tell me, and I don't know, I guess I thought I should go to the hospital because he was my father, and what if he died? I didn't want to live with that guilt. So I went, and he was hospitalized for like a week. And during that time, My mom and I talked a bit. She apologized for not listening to me, said they had realized Jessica exaggerated things, and I, being honest, wanted to believe her. I wanted to think they were finally really seeing me. My dad recovered well, thank God, and when he got out of the hospital, we started rebuilding the relationship little by little. Things weren't perfect, but they were tolerable, let's say. I was still living my life. I had already moved to a bigger apartment just for myself. I was advancing in my career, and my parents and I would see each other every couple of weeks for lunch or dinner. Jessica was still clearly the favorite, but at least there wasn't as much direct conflict anymore. At some point, I found out my parents were having money problems. My dad had lost his job, and my mom only worked part-time, and I started helping them financially. It wasn't much, like $300 or $400 a month. But for them, it made a difference, and I felt it was the right thing to do. They were my parents, after all. I met Michael when I was 23. We worked at the same company, though, in different departments, and he was the first serious relationship I had. He was everything I needed, someone who supported me, who valued me, who never made me feel less. After 4 years together, on our anniversary, he proposed to me at the restaurant where we had our first date, and obviously I said yes. I was super excited, like it was the happiest moment of my life up to that point. And when I told my parents, they seemed happy too. Well, my mom was more excited than my dad. But still, I started planning the wedding. Nothing super extravagant because we were paying for it ourselves. But it was going to be nice, in a pretty garden with like 80 guests between family and friends. Obviously, I invited my parents and Jessica too, because despite everything that had happened, they were still my family, and part of me wanted them to be there on such an important day. The date was set for a Saturday in May. I had sent out the invitations like 3 months in advance, and everyone confirmed they were going to attend. I remember my mom even helped me pick out the dress. We went shopping together and everything, and I thought maybe finally things were going to be okay between us. But then, like 2 weeks before the wedding, my mom called to tell me they weren't going to be able to come. I asked her why. Obviously. And she told me Jessica had organized a special brunch that same day, and it was very important to her that they be there. A brunch. A simple brunch that wasn't even for anything specific, just because Jessica wanted it. I told my mom it was my wedding, that I was only going to get married once, that they had confirmed months ago, and she just said that Jessica had invited them first technically, and they couldn't cancel on her. I tried to reason with her, told her Jessica could change the date of her brunch because it literally wasn't anything important, but my mom got defensive and we ended up arguing. I called my dad later, hoping he'd be more reasonable, but he told me exactly the same thing, that they had already promised Jessica and they couldn't let her down. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what was happening. My sister had deliberately planned something on my wedding date to make sure my parents wouldn't go, and they were choosing her again. I told Michael crying that night, and he was furious too, but told me we were still going to have a beautiful wedding with the people who really loved us. And he was right. But it hurt so much. It was like the final confirmation that I was never going to be enough for my parents. That no matter what I did, Jessica was always going to be more important. The wedding day was bittersweet. On one hand, it was beautiful. Michael looked amazing. I felt like a princess in my dress. Our friends made everything special, but there were 2 empty chairs where my parents should have been. Some people asked where they were, and I just said they couldn't make it. I didn't want to ruin the day explaining the whole situation. I danced. I laughed. I enjoyed what I could. But there was a part of me that was broken inside. After the reception, when Michael and I were at the hotel before leaving for our honeymoon the next day, I blocked my parents and Jessica's numbers. I didn't send them a message explaining anything. I just blocked them and decided this time the no contact was going to be permanent. We went on our honeymoon to Greece for 2 weeks, and it was incredible. Just what we needed to disconnect from everything. But when we got back, like 3 days later, my mom showed up at my apartment. I don't know how, because I hadn't given her my new address. I guess she got my information from some relative. She knocked on the door at like 9 inches the morning on a Saturday. And when I opened it and saw her standing there, I almost had a heart attack. She started yelling at me as soon as she saw me. How dare I cut off contact with them? That we were family. That I was being selfish and dramatic. I tried to stay calm and told her they had decided to skip my wedding for Jessica's brunch. That had been their decision, and I was deciding to distance myself from people who clearly didn't value me. She said I was exaggerating, that it had only been 1 day, that I needed to get over it. Get over it. like it was something insignificant. I told her it was the pattern of my whole life, that I had always been less important than Jessica, and she denied everything. She said I made those things up, that I had always been the dramatic one, that they loved us both equally. It was so frustrating, like she was literally denying decades of experiences that I had lived. The argument got more and more intense, her crying saying I was destroying the family, me trying to make her understand why I was so hurt, and in the end I asked her to leave. She told me I was going to regret it, that family was the most important thing, and she left slamming the door. I was left shaking after she left. Michael came back from the gym like half an hour later and found me crying on the couch. I thought that would be the end of it, that they would finally leave me alone. But like a month later, Jessica sent me a text message from an unknown number. I guess she knew I had her blocked. The message was long, basically telling me she needed money to start a business, that it was my obligation as a sister to help her, that family helps each other. She was asking for like $15,000. I'm not kidding, that exact amount. I responded from the same number saying no, that I wasn't going to give her anything, and she started sending me messages blaming me, saying I had more money than her, that I was selfish, that I had always been jealous of her success. I blocked her, again, but then she started sending me messages from other numbers. And then came the most absurd thing of all. My parents sent me a certified letter. I had to sign to receive it, and everything. When I opened it, it was an itemized list. Literal a printed Excel list of all the expenses they claimed they had spent on me during my upbringing. Food, clothes, shelter, education, even things like gas to drive you to school and birthday gifts years 1 to 18. Everything added up with a total at the end of like $87,000. And there was a note saying that since I now had a good job and clearly had money to waste on my life, it was fair that I pay them back what they had invested in me. I stared at that letter, unable to believe it. I mean, were they seriously doing this? Michael was as shocked as I was. I tried to ignore it, but then Jessica started a social media campaign, posting vague things about family that turns their back on you when you need them most, and selfish sisters who forget where they come from. Some people who knew both of us started sending me messages asking what was going on, and I didn't even know what to tell them. I didn't want to drag everyone into our family drama, but I also didn't want them to think I was the bad guy. I decided to just not respond to anything public and block whoever asked me, but it was emotionally exhausting. Things kept escalating. My mom started showing up at my work. Literal, she would go to my office reception asking to see me, and I had to tell security not to let her come up. Jessica found my new phone number again and would send me messages at all hours, sometimes threatening to expose me publicly, other times begging me to reconsider, other times being super cruel and attacking me personally. I started having anxiety attacks. I wasn't sleeping well, and Michael was super worried about me. One day, we went out to dinner and my dad was waiting in the restaurant parking lot. He approached us asking me to talk, and when I told him no, he started yelling at me in front of everyone. It was humiliating and terrifying at the same time. I decided to talk to a lawyer to see what options I had legally. The lawyer reviewed all the documentation, the messages, the letters, everything, and confirmed there was no legal basis for what my family was asking. Parents can't charge their children for raising them. That's absurd. And there was also no legal obligation to give Jessica money. He told me I could request a restraining order if the harassment continued, and honestly, I started to consider doing it because the situation was seriously affecting my quality of life. But things got worse before they got better. Jessica posted my address on Facebook in a post saying I owed the family money and that anyone who knew me should know what kind of person I was. Random people started showing up at my building asking for me. Some neighbors looked at me weird, and I felt constantly in danger. My parents kept sending letters, increasingly aggressive, threatening to take me to court even though the lawyer had already told me they had no case. The harassment became part of my daily routine, and I was reaching a breaking point. Michael and I had a serious conversation about what to do. He completely supported me in whatever I decided, but we both knew we couldn't keep living like this. We considered moving to another city, changing numbers, basically starting over where my family couldn't find us. At first, I resisted because I felt it was unfair that I had to change my life because of them, but in the end, we decided our peace of mind was worth more than staying out of pride. I talked to the lawyer again and decided to file formal harassment charges against my parents and Jessica. We documented everything: the messages, the unsolicited visits, the social media posts, everything. I also requested restraining orders for all three of them. It was a long and emotionally devastating process. Like, having to testify about your own family in court is something I never thought I'd have to do, but I needed to protect myself. The orders were granted, which meant they legally couldn't approach me or contact me in any way. After that, we acted quickly. Michael got a job in another city, like 4 hours away. I requested a transfer at my company to the office in that same city. We sold the apartment, changed our phone numbers, emails, everything. We didn't tell anyone in the extended family where we were going, only a couple very close friends we trusted completely. It was like disappearing, basically. We packed our whole life into a moving truck and left without looking back. Now, we've been in the new city for like 6 months. And honestly, it's the most peaceful period I've had in years. I haven't heard anything from my parents or Jessica since we moved. I guess the restraining orders scared them enough, or they just don't know how to find us. But the truth is, I don't know if I made the right decision, you know? There are days when I feel relieved and free, and others when I wonder if I overreacted. If I should have tried one more time to talk to them. If they really deserved for me to cut them so radically out of my life. Michael tells me I did what I had to do to protect myself. And I know he's right, but it's still difficult. At the end of the day, they're my parents, she's my sister, and no matter how toxic they were still family. What hurts me most is that there was never a moment of clarity where they acknowledged what they did to me. There was never a, sorry, we treated you badly your whole life. There was never a real attempt to change. They just kept expecting me to adapt to their expectations, to accept being less than Jessica, to keep giving without receiving anything in return. And when I finally set boundaries and said no, I became the villain of the story. I guess that's what happens when you grow up in a dysfunctional family. Eventually, you have to choose between your own mental health or continuing to maintain relationships that destroy you from the inside, and I chose to save myself. I don't know if someday I'm going to regret that decision, but for now, it's the one that lets me sleep at night and live without that constant weight on my chest.